Marcus Wellington had built his empire from nothing. 25 years ago, he left his small hometown with just a suitcase and big dreams. Now, at 52, he owned hotels across 3 countries, luxury resorts, and a chain of restaurants that celebrities frequented. His name appeared on Forbes lists, and business magazines called him the king of hospitality. But success came with a price. Marcus hadn't been home in 8 years. His father, Robert Wellington, was now 78 and lived alone in the family's old Victorian house on Maple Street. The same house where Marcus grew up, where his mother used to make Sunday dinners and where his father taught him to play chess on rainy afternoons. Marcus told himself he was too busy for visits. Board meetings, international deals, and expansion plans filled every hour of his day. He hired Maria Santos, a kind woman in her 40s, to look after his father 3 years ago. She came highly recommended from an agency that specialized in elderly care. Marcus paid her well and assumed everything was fine. The calls from his father came less frequently now. When Robert did call, he seemed distant, often forgetting what he wanted to say. Marcus brushed it off as normal aging, never staying on the phone long enough to really listen. Last Tuesday, Marcus received a call that changed everything. His business partner, James, mentioned running into someone from Marcus's hometown at a conference. The man had asked about Marcus's father, saying he'd heard strange things were happening at the old Wellington house. James didn't know what the man meant, but something in his voice worried him. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his father's last phone call 2 weeks ago. Robert had sounded confused, asking Marcus when he was coming home for Christmas. It was only September. Marcus had quickly ended the call, saying he'd call back later. He never did. The next morning, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He canceled his meetings for the rest of the week, handed his responsibilities to his assistant, and booked a flight home. He didn't call ahead to warn Maria or his father. Something told him he needed to see what was really happening with his own eyes. As the plane descended into his hometown's small airport, Marcus felt nervous in a way he hadn't experienced since his first big business presentation. The familiar landscape below looked smaller than he remembered. The downtown area where he used to walk with his father seemed quiet and forgotten. Marcus rented a car and drove slowly through the streets of his childhood. Nothing had changed much except everything looked older and a bit worn down. The pharmacy where his father used to buy him comic books was now a dollar store. The park where they played catch had new playground equipment but fewer children. When he turned onto Maple Street, his heart started beating faster. There was his childhood home, the white Victorian house with blue shutters that his mother had loved so much, but something felt wrong. The yard, which his father had always kept perfectly neat, looked overgrown. Dead flowers hung from the porch planters and newspapers were scattered on the front steps. Marcus parked across the street and sat in his car for a few minutes, gathering courage. He'd imagined this homecoming many times over the years, but never like this. He'd always pictured himself arriving as the successful son, proud and confident. Instead, he felt like the boy who had left home all those years ago, unsure and worried. Taking a deep breath, Marcus got out of the car and walked toward the front door. As he got closer, he could hear voices coming from inside the house. One was definitely Maria's voice speaking in Spanish to someone, but there was another voice too, a man's voice that Marcus didn't recognize. The front door was slightly open, which was unusual. His father had always been careful about locking doors. Marcus pushed it open quietly and stepped into the hallway. The house smelled different, not like the lavender and old wood scent he remembered from his childhood. Now it smelled like cleaning products and something else he couldn't identify. The voices were coming from the living room. Marcus moved carefully down the hallway, his expensive shoes silent on the old wooden floors. As he got closer, he could make out what they were saying. Maria was talking to someone about money, about the old man, and about keeping him quiet. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The old man had to be his father. What did they mean about keeping him quiet? And who was Maria talking to? He crept closer to the living room doorway, staying hidden in the shadows of the hallway. Through the crack in the door, he could see Maria sitting at his father's old desk, counting money. Lots of money. Bills were spread across the desktop and she was putting them into neat piles. Standing next to her was a man Marcus had never seen before. He was younger, maybe in his 30s, with dark hair and a mustache. The man was holding what looked like a checkbook and he was writing in it while Maria watched. "How much this time?" the man asked in accented English. Same as always, Maria replied. The old man's pension plus what the son sends. He doesn't even know how much money there is. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. They were talking about stealing from his father. The money Marcus sent every month to make sure his father was comfortable was being taken. But where was his father? And what did Maria mean about keeping him quiet? Just then, Marcus heard a shuffling sound from upstairs, followed by a weak voice calling out, "Maria, Maria, I'm thirsty. Can I have some water?" It was his father's voice, but it sounded so frail and small. Marcus had to grip the wall to steady himself. His strong, proud father sounded like a lost child. "In a minute," Maria called back harshly, not even looking up from the money. "Stay in your room." The man with the mustache laughed quietly. "How much longer do you think we can keep this up?" "As long as it takes," Maria answered. "The son never visits, never calls much. And the old man doesn't remember things anyway. We're set for a long time." Marcus felt rage building inside his chest like a fire. These people were stealing from his father and treating him like a prisoner in his own home. How long had this been going on? How could he have been so blind? Marcus forced himself to stay hidden and listen. Every word felt like a knife in his heart, but he needed to understand the full situation before acting. The man with Maria was going through papers now, pulling out documents from his father's desk drawers. "What about these medical bills?" the man asked, holding up several papers. "The pharmacy keeps calling about unpaid prescriptions." Maria waved her hand dismissively. "Let them call. The old man doesn't need all those expensive medicines anyway. Half of them just make him sleepy, which actually makes our job easier." Marcus gripped his fist so tightly his knuckles turned white. His father's medications were being denied to him. No wonder Robert sounded so confused and weak during their phone calls. He was probably in pain and not getting the medical care he needed. "What about the physical therapy?" The man continued reading from another paper. "The doctor says he needs to keep moving or his legs will get worse." "Too expensive and too much trouble," Maria replied, stuffing more cash into an envelope. "Besides, if he could walk around better, he might try to go outside and talk to neighbors. This way he stays upstairs most of the time and nobody asks questions." The man laughed again, and Marcus wanted to rush in and punch him. They were deliberately keeping his father weak and isolated. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was abuse of an elderly person who couldn't defend himself. "Maria, please, I need to use the bathroom," came his father's voice from upstairs, sounding desperate now. "I said wait," Maria shouted back angrily. "Can't you see I'm busy?" Marcus heard his father's footsteps shuffling slowly across the floor upstairs. Then the sound of a door closing. His heart broke imagining his proud father, who had once been so independent and strong, now begging for basic care. The man was looking at more papers now. "What's this about a social worker wanting to do a home visit next month?" Maria's expression changed, and she looked worried for the first time. "I've been putting them off for months, but they're getting more pushy. They want to check on his living conditions and make sure he's getting proper care." "That could be a problem," the man said, stroking his mustache thoughtfully. "I know. I've been thinking we might need to move him somewhere else for a while. Maybe to that cheap nursing facility across town, just until the social worker stops asking questions." Marcus felt sick. They were planning to move his father to hide their crimes. He'd heard terrible stories about that nursing facility. It was known for poor conditions and neglect. His father would probably die there within months. How long before the son starts asking questions? The man wondered aloud. Maria laughed coldly. "That rich boy? He hasn't been here in years. All he cares about is his fancy hotels and making more money. He sends a check every month and thinks that makes him a good son. He has no idea what's really happening here." Those words hit Marcus harder than any physical blow could have. She was right, and that was the most painful part. He had been so focused on building his business empire that he'd abandoned the most important person in his life. He'd let money replace love, success replace responsibility. Besides, Maria continued, even if he did show up, the old man is so confused now he probably wouldn't be able to explain what's happening. And who would believe him anyway? Everyone thinks he's losing his mind. The man gathered up the papers and stuffed them into a briefcase. "I better go. Same time next week?" "Yes, but bring the new prescription forms. I want to try selling some of those pain medications. I heard they bring good money on the street." Marcus watched in horror as the man walked toward the front door. Maria was planning to not only deny his father necessary medications, but to sell them illegally. The level of cruelty was beyond anything he'd imagined. After the man left, Maria sat alone in the living room counting money. She seemed completely relaxed, as if stealing from and abusing an elderly man was just another normal day for her. She even started humming while she organized the cash. Upstairs, Marcus could hear his father moving around, probably trying to take care of himself since no help was coming. The sound of his father's struggle filled Marcus with both rage and determination. Marcus quietly backed away from the living room and slipped out the front door. He needed a moment to think clearly before confronting this situation. His business training had taught him to gather all the facts before making major decisions, and this was the most important decision of his life. Sitting in his rental car, Marcus pulled out his phone and started making calls. First, he called his lawyer in the city and explained the situation. The lawyer advised him to document everything and suggested bringing in the police and adult protective services immediately. Next, Marcus called his father's doctor, Dr. Peterson, who had been caring for the Wellington family for over 30 years. Dr. Peterson's voice was full of concern when Marcus explained what he'd witnessed. "I've been worried about your father for months," Dr. Peterson admitted. "He's missed several important appointments, and when I've called to check on him, that woman Maria always makes excuses. She claims he's too tired or too confused to come in, but the few times I've seen him, he seemed frightened." "Frightened of what?" Marcus asked, though he was starting to understand. "I think he was afraid to speak freely with her in the room. And Marcus, I have to tell you something else. Your father's condition isn't as bad as that woman has been telling people. Yes, he has some memory issues and he's physically weaker than he used to be, but his mind is still mostly clear. If he's as confused as she claims, it might be because he's not getting his medications properly." This revelation hit Marcus like lightning. His father wasn't losing his mind at all. He was being deliberately kept confused and weak by Maria and her accomplice. Robert was probably aware of what was happening to him but felt helpless to stop it. Marcus thanked Dr. Peterson and hung up, then sat in his car planning his next move. He could call the police right now and have Maria arrested, but he wanted to talk to his father first. He needed to see Robert with his own eyes and make sure he was okay before anything else happened. But he also knew he couldn't just walk into the house normally. Maria would probably try to prevent him from seeing his father or coach Robert on what to say. Marcus needed to catch them off guard and get to his father without Maria interfering. Looking at the house, Marcus noticed something he'd missed before. The back door, which led into the kitchen, was the same door he'd used as a child when he came home late from playing with friends. His father had never changed the hiding spot for the spare key, under the third flower pot on the back porch. Marcus waited until he saw Maria go upstairs, probably to check on his father, then quietly made his way to the back of the house. Sure enough, the key was exactly where it had always been. His father had kept that simple family tradition even after all these years. As Marcus quietly unlocked the back door, he could hear Maria's voice upstairs, speaking to his father in a harsh tone that made his blood boil. It was time to end this nightmare and save the man who had given him everything. Marcus slipped through the back door into the kitchen where he'd eaten countless meals as a child. The familiar room looked different now. Dirty dishes piled in the sink, expired food on the counters, and a general feeling of neglect. His mother would have been heartbroken to see her pristine kitchen in such a state. He could hear Maria upstairs talking loudly to his father. "I told you to stay in bed until I say you can get up. And stop asking for things. You already had your breakfast." Marcus checked the clock on the kitchen wall. It was nearly 2 in the afternoon. If his father had only been given breakfast, he must be starving. Looking in the refrigerator, Marcus found it nearly empty except for some old takeout containers and a few items that seemed to be Maria's personal food. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made Marcus quickly hide in the pantry. Through the crack in the door, he watched Maria come into the kitchen and grab a sandwich from the counter, apparently her lunch, while his father went hungry upstairs. She sat at the kitchen table eating and talking on her phone in Spanish. Marcus's college Spanish was rusty, but he caught enough to understand she was talking to someone about money and making plans to go out that evening. She was treating this house like her own personal residence while keeping his father prisoner upstairs. After Maria finished eating and went back upstairs, Marcus crept out of the pantry and quietly climbed the back staircase. The servants' stairs his mother used to use when she didn't want to disturb his father's business calls in the front parlor. The narrow staircase brought back so many childhood memories of sneaking around the house playing hide and seek. At the top of the stairs, Marcus could hear Maria in what used to be his parents' bedroom, talking harshly to his father. The door was partially open, and Marcus positioned himself where he could see inside without being spotted. What he saw made him want to cry. His father, once a tall, strong man who commanded respect in their small town, was sitting on the edge of the bed looking frail and defeated. He was wearing clothes that were too big for him, suggesting he'd lost significant weight. His hair, which had always been neatly combed, was messy and unwashed. "I'm telling you for the last time," Maria was saying, "your son doesn't want to be bothered with phone calls from you. He's very busy with important business. If you keep trying to call him, I'll have to take the phone away completely." Marcus felt his heart shatter. His father had been trying to call him, and Maria was preventing it. How many times had Robert tried to reach out for help, only to be silenced by this cruel woman? "But I just want to hear his voice," his father said softly, and Marcus could hear tears in those words. "I miss him so much. Maybe if I could just talk to him." "He doesn't miss you," Maria said cruelly. "If he cared about you, he would visit. Rich people only care about money, not family. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." Marcus saw his father's shoulders slump even further. The psychological abuse was almost worse than the physical neglect. Maria was systematically destroying his father's spirit, making him believe that his only son had abandoned him completely. "Now," Maria continued, "I'm going out for a few hours. You stay in this room and don't make any noise. If the neighbors hear you and come asking questions, you tell them everything is fine. Do you understand?" His father nodded weakly like a broken man who had given up hope. "And don't even think about trying to use the phone downstairs. I've unplugged it and I'll know if you touch it." After Maria left the room, Marcus heard her go downstairs and then the front door slam. Her car started and drove away. Finally, Marcus was alone in the house with his father. Taking a deep breath, Marcus knocked gently on the bedroom door. "Dad, it's me, Marcus." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Then Marcus heard movement and his father's voice, shaky and uncertain. "Marcus? Is that really you, son?" Marcus opened the door and stepped into the room. When his father saw him, the old man's face went through a range of emotions: surprise, joy, fear, and then confusion. "You're really here?" Robert asked, struggling to stand up from the bed. "But Maria said you were too busy, that you didn't want to be bothered with me." Marcus rushed to his father's side and helped him sit back down, then knelt beside the bed so they were at eye level. Up close, he could see how thin his father had become, how his once bright eyes now looked tired and scared. "Dad, I'm so sorry," Marcus said, taking his father's hands. "They felt so fragile, like bird bones. I should have come sooner. I should have been here." "I tried to call you so many times," Robert whispered, as if afraid Maria might hear even though she was gone. "But she said you told her not to let me bother you. She said you were angry with me for being a burden." "That's not true, Dad. None of that is true. I never said anything like that. In fact, I never talked to Maria about limiting your calls. You could never be a burden to me." His father's eyes filled with tears. "I thought you didn't love me anymore. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong and you decided you were better off without your old father." Marcus felt his own tears starting. "Dad, you didn't do anything wrong. I love you more than anything. I was just so caught up in work that I lost sight of what was really important. But I'm here now and I'm going to fix everything." "Are you sure?" Robert asked, still seeming afraid to hope. "Because sometimes my memory isn't so good anymore and I get confused about things. Maria says I imagine things that didn't happen. Your memory is fine, Dad, and you're not imagining anything. That woman has been lying to both of us." Marcus helped his father stand up slowly. "When did you last eat a real meal?" "I'm not sure. Maybe yesterday. Maria brings me some food sometimes, but she says I eat too much and that I need to be careful not to waste money on groceries." Marcus was furious but tried not to let it show in his voice. "Well, right now we're going downstairs and I'm making you the biggest meal you want." "What sounds good?" His father's face lit up for the first time since Marcus had arrived. Could we have grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, like your mother used to make on Sundays?" "Absolutely," Marcus said, putting his arm around his father's shoulders to support him as they walked. "And Dad, we have a lot to talk about. But first I want you to know something important. You're never going to have to see that woman again. I'm here now and I'm going to take care of everything." As they made their way slowly down the stairs together, Marcus was already making plans in his head. He would call the police as soon as his father was fed and comfortable. He would make sure Maria and her accomplice were arrested and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. He would hire the best home care agency in the state to find trustworthy people to help his father. But most importantly, he would never again let business or anything else keep him away from the man who had raised him with such love and sacrifice. His father deserved so much better than the nightmare he'd been living through, and Marcus was determined to make sure his remaining years were filled with the comfort, respect, and love he deserved. In the kitchen, as Marcus helped his father into a chair and started gathering ingredients for their simple meal, Robert reached out and touched his son's hand. "I knew you'd come back," he said quietly. "Even when I felt so alone and scared, something inside me knew you wouldn't abandon me forever." Marcus squeezed his father's hand gently. "Never, Dad, never again." While the grilled cheese sandwiches sizzled in the pan, Marcus and his father sat together at the kitchen table. Robert looked more alert already, as if having his son there had awakened something in him that had been sleeping for too long. "Tell me about everything that's been happening, Dad," Marcus said gently. "I need to understand how bad this situation has gotten." Robert was quiet for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. "It started slowly," he began. "At first, Maria seemed very nice. She cooked good meals and kept the house clean. She was helpful when I had trouble remembering things or when my arthritis made it hard to do certain tasks." Marcus flipped the sandwiches, listening carefully to every word. "But after a few months, things began to change. She started controlling more and more of my daily routine. She said it was for my own good, that I was getting confused and needed more structure. She took over paying the bills, said it was too complicated for me to handle." "When did you first realize something was wrong?" Marcus asked. "When I tried to call you for your birthday last year," Robert said sadly. "She told me the phone wasn't working. But later that day I heard her using it to make her own calls. When I asked her about it, she got very angry and said I was being paranoid and suspicious." Marcus felt a stab of guilt remembering that birthday. He'd been in Tokyo on business and had wondered why his father hadn't called. He'd assumed Robert was upset with him for missing Christmas the year before. "After that, she started telling me that you had called and left messages saying I shouldn't contact you unless it was an emergency. She said you were frustrated with me for being needy and that I needed to learn to be more independent." "Dad, I never said any of those things. I never left any messages like that." "I know that now," Robert said. "But at the time I believed her. You had been so busy and our phone calls had become shorter and less frequent. It seemed possible that you were getting tired of dealing with your old father." The sandwiches were ready, and Marcus served them with steaming bowls of tomato soup. Watching his father eat with obvious hunger broke Marcus's heart. This should have been a happy reunion, not a rescue mission. "What about the money situation?" Marcus asked carefully. "I've been sending monthly checks to cover all your expenses and more." Robert nodded slowly. "Maria handles all of that now. She told me that the cost of everything has gone up so much that the money you send barely covers the basics. She said if I wanted extras like my favorite foods or new clothes, I would have to ask you for more money. And she didn't think you would appreciate that." Marcus did quick math in his head. The amount he'd been sending monthly should have covered not just basic needs but also medical care, medications, household maintenance, and plenty left over for comforts and emergencies. She also said that my medical insurance doesn't cover as much as it used to, so we had to cut back on doctor visits and some of my medications to save money. "Which medications did she say you had to stop taking?" Robert listed several medications that Marcus knew were important for his father's heart condition, blood pressure, and arthritis. No wonder his father looked so frail and was in obvious discomfort. "Did you ever try to contact Dr. Peterson directly? I asked Maria to call him several times when I was feeling worse, but she always said he was too busy, or that we should wait to see if I felt better on my own. She said doctors are very expensive and we shouldn't waste money on unnecessary visits." Marcus was taking mental notes of everything, building a case against Maria that would ensure she faced serious consequences. But his immediate concern was his father's health and well-being. "Dad, I want you to know that money has never been an issue. I've been very successful with my businesses and taking care of you is my top priority. You should have been getting the best medical care, the best food, anything you needed or wanted." Robert's eyes filled with tears again. "I feel so foolish. I should have known something was wrong. But she was very convincing and I guess I wanted to believe that you still cared about me. So when she said you were just busy and worried about money, I tried to be understanding. You're not foolish. Dad? She's a professional criminal who knows how to manipulate people. What she did to you was cruel and calculated. After they finished eating, Marcus helped his father to the living room. Robert moved slowly but seemed steadier after having a real meal. Marcus noticed that his father kept looking toward the front window, as if watching for Maria's return. She usually comes back around dinner time, Robert explained. She doesn't like it when I'm anywhere in the house except my bedroom when she's not here. She says it's easier to keep track of me that way. Marcus was shocked by how completely Maria had taken control of his father's life. This wasn't just neglect or even theft. It was imprisonment of an elderly person in his own home. Dad, I need to ask you something important. Has Maria or that man she works with ever threatened you? Have they ever hurt you physically? Robert was quiet for a long moment. Not exactly hurt, he said finally. But sometimes when I've asked too many questions or complained about something, Maria gets very angry. She's grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises a few times. And once when I tried to go outside to get the mail, she locked me in my room for the whole day without any food. Marcus felt his anger rising again, but he kept his voice calm and gentle. Dad, that's abuse. What she's done to you is illegal, and she's going to be punished for it. I don't want to cause trouble, Robert said quickly, the fear returning to his voice. Maybe we could just ask her to leave? I don't want to involve the police or courts. I just want things to go back to normal. Marcus understood his father's reluctance. After months of being controlled and intimidated, Robert was afraid of making Maria angry. But Marcus knew that letting her leave quietly would mean she could do this to some other vulnerable person. Dad, I understand why you're scared, but what Maria has done is very serious. She's stolen thousands of dollars from you, denied you medical care, and treated you like a prisoner. If we don't stop her, she'll do the same thing to another elderly person somewhere else. Just then, they heard a car pulling into the driveway. Robert immediately tensed up, his face going pale. She's back early, he whispered. Marcus, maybe you should hide. If she sees you here, she'll be very angry with me after you leave. Dad, I'm not leaving you alone with her ever again, Marcus said firmly, and I'm not hiding from someone who has been abusing my father. They heard Maria's key in the front door, then her footsteps in the hallway. She was calling out in a harsh voice, Robert, where are you? I told you to stay upstairs. Marcus stood up and walked toward the hallway, with his father following slowly behind him. When Maria saw Marcus, she froze in complete shock. Who are you? She demanded, though Marcus could see recognition dawning in her eyes. I'm Marcus Wellington, he said in a voice that had commanded boardrooms around the world. Robert's son, and you and I need to have a very serious conversation. Maria's face went through several expressions, surprise, fear, then a calculated attempt at friendliness. Oh, Mr. Wellington, what a wonderful surprise. Your father will be so happy to see you. I've been taking such good care of him. Really? Marcus said coldly. Because from what I've seen today, you've been stealing from him, starving him, denying him medical care, and treating him like a prisoner in his own home. Maria's fake smile disappeared. I don't know what he's told you, but you have to understand your father gets confused sometimes. He doesn't always remember things correctly. My father's memory is fine, Marcus replied, and I didn't just hear about what you've been doing. I saw it with my own eyes. Maria's eyes darted around nervously, clearly trying to figure out exactly what Marcus had witnessed. I think there's been some misunderstanding, she said, attempting to regain control of the situation. Your father needs a lot of care, and I've been working very hard to provide it. Maybe we could sit down and discuss any concerns you have. The only discussion we're having is with the police, Marcus said firmly. I saw you counting stolen money. I heard you talking about keeping my father quiet. I know about your partner and the fake medical documents. At the mention of her partner, Maria's face went completely white. She realized that Marcus knew much more than she'd initially thought. Look, she said, her voice becoming desperate. Maybe I made some mistakes, but I've been working here for 3 years without proper pay raises. Your father is difficult sometimes, and the job is harder than expected. If there are problems, we can work them out. Marcus stepped closer to her, his voice low and dangerous. You've been stealing thousands of dollars every month. You've denied an elderly man his medications and medical care. You've isolated him from his family and made him believe his son didn't love him. Those aren't mistakes, those are crimes. Robert, who had been standing quietly behind Marcus, finally spoke up in a voice stronger than it had been in months. Maria, I trusted you. I welcomed you into my home and treated you with respect. How could you do this to me? Maria turned on Robert with the vicious tone Marcus had heard earlier. You think you're so innocent? You're a burden on everyone around you. Your son dumped you here and forgot about you because he knows you're nothing but trouble. That's enough, Marcus shouted, stepping between Maria and his father. Don't you ever speak to him like that again. Maria seemed to realize she'd revealed her true nature too clearly. She tried to backtrack, but it was too late. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I'm just stressed because you're making accusations about things you don't understand. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police now. I suggest you don't try to leave. Wait, Maria said frantically. What if I just quit and leave quietly? I'll give back whatever money you think is missing and we can pretend this never happened. Give back the money? Marcus laughed bitterly. Do you have the thousands of dollars you've stolen over the past 3 years? Do you have my father's health back? Do you have all the time back that he spent scared and alone, thinking his son had abandoned him? Maria's desperate attempt at negotiation failed, and her demeanor changed completely. The fake kindness disappeared, replaced by cold anger. Fine, call the police. But you'll never be able to prove anything. It's my word against a confused old man's. Actually, Marcus said, pulling out a small recording device from his pocket. I've been recording this entire conversation, and I recorded your conversation with your partner earlier today through the window. Maria stared at the device in horror. In her panic to talk her way out of trouble, she'd confessed to everything. While Marcus called the police, he also called Dr. Peterson and asked him to come to the house immediately to examine his father. Then he called his lawyer to make sure everything was handled properly from a legal standpoint. Within 30 minutes, the police arrived. Marcus had prepared a detailed summary of what he'd witnessed and recorded. The officers were professional but clearly disturbed by the evidence of elder abuse. As they questioned Maria, her story fell apart completely. When confronted with Marcus's recordings and evidence, she tried to blame everything on her partner, claiming he had forced her to participate in the theft and abuse. Where can we find this partner? One of the officers asked. Maria hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she realized that cooperating might help her case. She provided the man's name, Carlos Rivera, and his address across town. She also revealed that he had been the one organizing the financial fraud, using his knowledge of banking to help steal and launder Robert's money. He told me it would just be borrowing, Maria lied desperately. He said we'd pay it all back eventually. The officer taking notes looked up skeptically. Ma'am, we have recordings of you discussing how to keep the victim quiet and planning to sell his medications illegally. This goes far beyond borrowing money. While the police continued questioning Maria, Dr. Peterson arrived and immediately began examining Robert. Marcus stayed close to his father, holding his hand while the doctor checked his vital signs and asked questions about his symptoms. Robert, I need you to tell me about any pain you've been experiencing, Dr. Peterson said gently. And don't worry about the cost of treatment or medications. Your son has made it clear that money is not an issue. Robert looked confused for a moment, as if he couldn't quite believe that medical care was suddenly available again. My chest has been hurting for months, he admitted quietly. And my joints ache all the time. But Maria said we couldn't afford to bother you unless it was an emergency. Dr. Peterson's face grew stern as he listened to the list of symptoms Robert had been suffering without treatment. Marcus, your father needs to go to the hospital immediately. His blood pressure is dangerously high, and I suspect his heart medication dosage needs major adjustment. He's also showing signs of malnutrition and dehydration. Whatever he needs, Marcus said without hesitation. The best care available. As the paramedics arrived to transport Robert to the hospital, Marcus rode with him in the ambulance. Robert gripped his son's hand tightly, still seeming afraid that Marcus might disappear again. I'm not leaving you, Dad, Marcus promised. I'm going to stay right here until you're completely better. At the hospital, Marcus called his assistant and instructed her to cancel all his appointments and business trips for the next month. His empire could run without him for a while, but his father needed him now more than ever. The next few hours were busy with medical tests and procedures. Dr. Peterson worked with the hospital staff to create a comprehensive treatment plan to address all of Robert's health issues that had been neglected during Maria's abuse. Meanwhile, the police had arrested Carlos Rivera at his apartment. They found evidence of the stolen money, forged documents, and even some of Robert's medications that they had planned to sell. Both Maria and Carlos were charged with elder abuse, theft, fraud, and conspiracy. As evening approached, Robert was settled into a comfortable hospital room with proper medication flowing through an IV. He looked better already, with color returning to his cheeks and a sense of peace replacing the constant fear he'd been living with. "Marcus," he said softly, "I need to tell you something. Even during the worst times with Maria, I never stopped believing that you loved me. I knew that if you really understood what was happening, you would come to help me." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. "I should have known sooner, Dad. I should have visited more often, called more frequently. I'm so sorry I let my business become more important than you." "You're here now," Robert replied. "That's what matters. And son, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. Your mother would be proud too. I just missed being part of your life." "That's going to change," Marcus promised. "I've been thinking about it all day. I want to move back home to be closer to you. I can run my businesses from here just as well as from the city. And I want to hire the best home care team available, people we can trust completely." Robert's eyes lit up with joy. "You would really do that? Move back to our little town?" "Dad, you're more important than any business deal or fancy city life. I've spent years building an empire, but what good is any of it if I don't have you to share it with?" The next morning brought more good news. The police had recovered a significant portion of the stolen money from Maria and Carlos's accounts. Marcus's lawyer was confident that they could recover most of the financial losses, though the emotional damage would take longer to heal. Marcus also received a call from the district attorney's office. Both Maria and Carlos had decided to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for reduced sentences. They would both serve time in prison and be required to pay full restitution. "They picked the wrong family to victimize, the prosecutor told Marcus. "Your father's case is going to help us crack down on this type of elder abuse throughout the county." 2 weeks later, Robert was released from the hospital with a clean bill of health. The proper medications and medical care had worked wonders, and he looked more like the strong, dignified man Marcus remembered from his childhood. His confusion had cleared up completely once he started receiving his heart and blood pressure medications again. Marcus had used those 2 weeks productively. He'd interviewed dozens of home care agencies and personally met with potential caregivers. This time, he did extensive background checks and spoke with multiple references. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt his father ever again. The woman he finally hired was named Sarah Chen, a registered nurse in her 50s with 20 years of experience in elder care. She had glowing references from families who described her as not just professional, but genuinely caring. Most importantly, she understood that her job was to help Robert maintain his independence and dignity, not to control his life. "Mr. Wellington," Sarah had said during her interview, "my philosophy is that this is your father's home, and I'm a guest here to provide assistance when needed. The goal is to help him live his best life possible, not to take over his life." That was exactly what Marcus wanted to hear. Marcus had also made good on his promise to move back to his hometown. He'd purchased a beautiful house just 2 blocks from his father's home, close enough to visit daily, but far enough to give Robert his privacy and independence. He'd set up a sophisticated home office that allowed him to manage his business empire remotely, with occasional trips to the city when absolutely necessary. The first morning Robert was back home from the hospital, Marcus arrived to find his father sitting on the front porch with Sarah, both of them laughing at something Sarah had said. Robert was wearing a new sweater Marcus had bought him, and he looked relaxed and happy. "Good morning, Dad," Marcus said, climbing the porch steps. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I have in years," Robert replied, and Marcus could see that it was true. "Sarah was just telling me about her grandson who's learning to play chess. I offered to teach him some advanced strategies." Marcus smiled. His father had always been an excellent chess player and had taught Marcus the game when he was just 6 years old. It was wonderful to see Robert excited about sharing that knowledge with a new generation. "Speaking of chess," Marcus said, "I have a surprise for you." He pulled out an ornately carved wooden chess set from a bag he'd been carrying. "I remember you always wanted one like this when I was growing up, but Mom said it was too expensive." Robert's eyes filled with happy tears as he examined the beautiful pieces. "This is incredible, son, but you don't need to buy me expensive gifts to make up for what happened." "I'm not buying it to make up for anything," Marcus said. "I'm buying it because I love you and I want you to have nice things." And because I'm hoping you'll let me play against you regularly now that I'm living nearby. I'd like that very much, Robert said softly. Though I should warn you, I've gotten rusty during these past few years. We'll practice together, Marcus promised. That afternoon, while Sarah prepared lunch in the kitchen, Marcus and Robert set up the new chess set in the living room. As they arranged the pieces, Robert seemed thoughtful. Marcus, I need to tell you something. What happened with Maria was terrible, but in some ways it brought us back together. I was so afraid that I'd lost you forever to your business success. Marcus looked up from the chessboard. Dad, you could never lose me. I may have gotten distracted by work, but you've always been the most important person in my life. I know that now, Robert said. But for a while, especially after your mother died, I felt like maybe I didn't have anything left to offer you. You were so successful and sophisticated, and I was just an old man in a small town. You're not just anything, Marcus said firmly. You're the man who taught me how to be honest in business when it would have been easier to cut corners. You're the one who showed me that success means nothing if you don't have people to share it with. Everything good about me comes from you and Mom. They started their chess game, and Marcus was surprised by how quickly his father's strategic thinking returned. Robert had indeed gotten rusty, but the fundamental intelligence and wisdom were still there, sharper than ever now that his mind was clear. Check, Robert said with a grin after a particularly clever move. Nice one, Dad? Marcus laughed, studying the board. I see I'm going to have to bring my A game. As they played, Sarah occasionally checked on them from the kitchen, smiling at the sight of father and son reconnecting over their shared love of the game. That evening, Marcus stayed for dinner, a delicious meal that Sarah had prepared with input from Robert about his favorite foods. As they ate, Robert told stories about Marcus's childhood that Sarah seemed to genuinely enjoy hearing. Did he tell you about the time Marcus tried to build a treehouse by himself? Robert asked Sarah with a chuckle. He was so determined to prove he was grown up enough to do it alone. But after the whole thing collapsed, he came inside crying and asked me to help him build it properly. And it was the best treehouse in the neighborhood once we built it together, Marcus added. I learned that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, it's just smart planning. That's a lesson that applies to more than treehouses, Robert said meaningfully. And Marcus knew his father was talking about the situation with Maria. If Robert had felt comfortable asking for help sooner, or if Marcus had been paying closer attention, the abuse might have been discovered months earlier. After dinner, as Marcus prepared to leave for his own house, Robert walked him to the door. Thank you, Robert said simply, not just for rescuing me from that situation, but for coming back into my life completely. I feel like I have my son back. Marcus hugged his father tightly. I feel like I have my life back. These past 2 weeks spending time with you every day have been happier than any business success I've ever had. Will I see you tomorrow? Robert asked, though he seemed to already know the answer. Of course. I thought maybe we could work on that garden Mom always wanted to plant in the backyard. Sarah mentioned you've been talking about growing tomatoes. Robert's face lit up. Your mother would love that. She always said this house needed more flowers and vegetables. As Marcus walked the 2 blocks to his own house that night, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just 2 weeks. He'd gone from being a successful but lonely businessman to being a son again, with daily purpose beyond profit margins and expansion plans. His phone rang as he reached his front door. It was his assistant calling about a potential merger deal that could make him millions. Sir, they need an answer by tomorrow morning, she explained. It's a really good opportunity. Marcus looked back toward his father's house, where he could see the warm lights in the windows and Sarah helping Robert prepare for bed. Tell them I'm not interested, Marcus said. I have more important things to focus on right now. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus had his priorities exactly right. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the backyard of his father's house admiring the flourishing garden they had created together. Tomatoes hung heavy on the vines, sunflowers stretched toward the sky, and his mother's favorite roses bloomed along the fence. Robert was kneeling among the vegetables, carefully harvesting peppers with Sarah's help. These are perfect for tonight's dinner, Robert said, holding up a bright red pepper. Sarah's teaching me to make that stir-fry recipe her grandmother used to make. Marcus smiled, watching his father move with confidence and energy. The transformation had been remarkable. Robert had gained back the weight he'd lost during Maria's abuse. His color was healthy, and most importantly, his spirit had fully returned. He was once again the engaged, curious, loving man Marcus remembered from his childhood. The legal case against Maria and Carlos had concluded the month before. Both had been sentenced to prison time and ordered to pay full restitution. More significantly, their case had led to a county-wide investigation that uncovered several other instances of elder abuse by unscrupulous caregivers. New regulations had been put in place to better protect vulnerable seniors. Marcus had testified at their sentencing hearing, speaking not just about the financial crimes but about the emotional damage they had inflicted on his father. "They didn't just steal money," he had told the judge. "They stole my father's dignity, his sense of security, and nearly destroyed his faith in human kindness. They made him believe that his own son had abandoned him. The financial losses can be recovered, but the psychological harm could have lasted the rest of his life." The judge had been clearly moved by Marcus's testimony and had given both defendants the maximum sentences allowed under the law. Today marked another milestone. It was the first anniversary of Marcus's return home. He had planned a special celebration, but he'd kept the details secret from his father. "Dad, can you come inside for a minute?" Marcus called from the back porch. "I have something to show you." Robert and Sarah exchanged curious glances but followed Marcus into the house. In the living room, Marcus had set up a display of framed photographs spanning his father's entire life. Childhood pictures, wedding photos with Marcus's mother, images of Robert teaching young Marcus to fish and play baseball, and recent photos of them working in the garden together. "What's all this?" Robert asked, clearly touched by the collection of memories. "It's a celebration of an amazing life," Marcus said. "Dad, this past year has taught me so much about what really matters. I spent decades chasing success and money, thinking that's what would make me happy. But watching you recover from everything Maria put you through, seeing your strength and resilience, has shown me what real success looks like." He pointed to a photo of Robert teaching 5-year-old Marcus to tie his shoes. "Real success is being the kind of man who raises his child with patience and love. It's working hard to provide for your family while still being present for the important moments." Marcus moved to another photo. Robert and his wife dancing at their 25th wedding anniversary. "It's building a marriage based on genuine partnership and devotion. It's being faithful and committed even when times get tough." "And this," Marcus said, indicating a recent photo of Robert playing chess with Sarah's grandson, "is sharing your knowledge and experience with the next generation. It's staying engaged with life and continuing to grow and learn even as you age." Robert's eyes were misty as he looked at all the photographs. "Son, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do," Marcus interrupted gently. "Because for too many years I measured success by bank account balances and business achievements. But you know what my greatest success really is? It's being your son. It's having been raised by a man who taught me right from wrong, who showed me how to treat people with respect and kindness." Sarah quietly stepped out of the room to give them privacy, but not before Marcus saw her wiping away tears of her own. "The wealth I've accumulated doesn't mean anything compared to the wealth of having you as my father," Marcus continued, "and I almost lost sight of that completely. If that terrible situation with Maria hadn't happened, I might have continued living my shallow, empty life until it was too late." Robert moved closer to his son. "Marcus, what happened brought you home to me. I can't say I'm grateful for the abuse and theft, but I am grateful for having you back in my life." "Well, I have one more surprise," Marcus said, pulling out an official-looking document. "I've been working with my lawyers for months on this." Robert took the papers and read them slowly, his expression changing from confusion to amazement. "You're establishing a foundation?" "The Robert Wellington Foundation for Elder Protection," Marcus confirmed. "It will fund programs to prevent elder abuse, provide support for victims, and train caregivers to the highest standards. The foundation will also offer free legal assistance to families dealing with situations like what we went through." "But Marcus, this represents millions of dollars. Money I'm honored to spend in your name," Marcus said firmly. "Dad, you've always been generous with everyone around you. When I was growing up, you helped countless neighbors and friends without expecting anything in return. Now I have the resources to help on a much larger scale, and I want to do it in your honor." Robert sat down heavily in his favorite chair, overwhelmed by the gesture. "I don't know what to say." Say you'll help me run it, Marcus replied. I need someone with wisdom and compassion to guide this foundation. Someone who understands what vulnerable seniors face. I can't think of anyone more qualified than you. You really want me to be involved? Dad, I want us to be partners in this. Just like we're partners in everything else now. That evening, they celebrated with a dinner that included several neighbors and friends who had become important parts of their lives over the past year. Dr. Peterson was there, along with Sarah and her family, and even the police officers who had handled Maria's arrest had stopped by to congratulate them. As the evening wound down and the guests prepared to leave, Marcus found himself sitting on the front porch with his father, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. You know, Robert said thoughtfully, I've been thinking about something your mother used to say. She always told me that the best thing we could give you wasn't money or possessions but roots and wings. Roots and wings, Marcus asked. Roots to know where you came from and what values to hold on to. Wings to go out and achieve your dreams, Robert smiled. I think we gave you good wings, maybe too good. You flew so far and so high that I worried you'd forgotten about your roots. But I came back, Marcus said. Yes, you did. And now you have both. You've kept your wings, your ability to achieve great things, but you've remembered your roots too. You've found the balance. Marcus nodded, understanding exactly what his father meant. I spent years thinking I had to choose between success and family, between achievement and relationships. But you've shown me that real success includes both. And you've shown me that it's never too late to repair what's been damaged, Robert replied. 6 months ago I thought I'd lost you forever. Tonight I feel like the luckiest father in the world. As they sat together in comfortable silence, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he'd been a wealthy but lonely man who had forgotten what truly mattered. The shock of discovering his father's abuse had been devastating, but it had also been the wake-up call that saved both of their lives. Now, Marcus had something more valuable than any business empire. He had a relationship with his father built on mutual respect, daily presence, and shared purpose. They had both emerged from the darkness of Maria's abuse stronger and more connected than ever before. The foundation they were starting together would help other families avoid the pain they had experienced. But more than that, it represented the values Robert had instilled in Marcus from childhood. The importance of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, of using success to serve others, and of never forgetting that wealth means nothing without love. Ready to go inside, Dad? Marcus asked as the last light faded from the sky. In a minute, Robert replied. I just want to sit here a little longer with my son. Marcus settled back in his chair in no hurry to end this perfect day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight was about savoring the simple joy of being together, of being family, of being home. The wealthy mogul who had returned to find his father in crisis had discovered something far more valuable than money or business success. He had rediscovered love, purpose, and the unbreakable bond between a father and son, and that was worth more than all the gold in the world.